My name is Connor Green, and this is the story of how my family and eventually I got to be living in Estevan, Saskatchewan. My story begins during the reign of Catherine the Great of Russia, which was during the years of 1762 to 1796. Catherine wanted the land in eastern Russia to be settled and farmed. Between 1756 and 1763, which overlaps the reign of Catherine, the Seven-Year War was waging. The global war spanned the continents of Europe, the Americas, West Africa, India, and the Philippines. The conflict split Europe into two alliances, the Kingdom of Great Britain and its many allies on one side, and the Kingdom of France with its allies on the other. Russian armies were close to joining this war, but wouldn't gain very much by doing so. Many German settlers, including my great-great-grandfather Rudolf Beverdorf, immigrated from Germany to Russia as they were looking forward to promises of wealth. The land could be rented if one agreed to farm it. These German settlers established towns with churches and schools as well as the farmland. Rudolf settled near Volhynia, Russia, where the land was extremely hostile and needed draining and clearing as it was marshy and heavily forested. After much hard work, the settlers gained ownership of the land they rented, paying 3 rubles per hectare. However, the settlements remained isolated as the difficult conditions under which they lived in did not attract many new immigrants. A few years before Rudolf emigrated to Russia, the American Revolution began. By 1881, Rudolf was living in the town of Dermanka, Volhynia. He was a school teacher in a Lutheran school there. The German schools were closely connected to the church and received no state funding. They were supported by the community, though. While in Dermanka, Rudolf met and married his wife, Maria. They had one young boy, my great-uncle Gus, and a newborn baby, great-uncle Herb. Days after Uncle Herb was born, the Bolshevik uprising began. The Bolsheviks, later known as the Communist Party, closed the border between Russia and Poland, trapping all the German settlers behind enemy lines. They were persecuted by the Bolsheviks, and the property they developed was confiscated. Many settlers, including Rudolf and Maria, escaped with the help of the Polish underground. During this time, across the ocean in Canada and US, immigrants from Asia, Britain, China, Eastern Europe, Finland, Germany, Norway, Poland, and Ukraine were arriving on the prairies. The immigration policy at the time had few restrictions and focused mainly on the safety of the immigrants during their passage. Great-great-grandpa Rudolf escaped Russia first and, hearing of free land in the US, emigrated hoping to earn enough money to buy passage and pay the Polish underground to smuggle his wife and children out of Russia. Months later, Rudolf, after arriving at Ellis Island, New York, sent money borrowed from a relative to pay for Maria's smuggling and passage. Soon after, Maria was smuggled across the border carrying 2 children and a small knapsack of belongings. The Germans who were left behind, unable to escape, were moved on foot to northern Russia near the Arctic Circle. Most died of starvation and many froze to death. In 1889, on arriving in New York, Maria and the children were met by Rudolf. They searched for the free land they'd heard about, but found it already being homesteaded in the south of US. They moved further north in search of free land they heard was still available. At this time, a lot of effort was being made by politicians to encourage migration of British settlers to Canada. One politician, Sir Clifford Sifton, recruited immigrants from Eastern Europe as the Ukrainian and Polish peasants were becoming more and more discontent with their Russian masters. In neighboring Germany, things were equally bad for Ukrainian, Russian, and Polish peasants, who were beaten in riots after being rounded up by authorities and their supporters. On arriving at the decision to cross into Canada, Rudolf and Maria settled at Stoughton. On the bald prairie, they were restricted to building sod houses or shacks built from disassembled wagons that had once carried their families and belongings. Dried horse and cow dung fueled their campfires or small cook stoves. Even though it took months to clear the land and grow their first crops, there were many other challenges faced by Rudolf and Maria. They, along with thousands of other farmers, soon discovered that the free parcels of land weren't large enough, or the season long enough, to feed their horses and cows. never mind their growing families. Soon, Rudolph and Maria had several children, 7 in all, including my great-grandpa Ephraim Beaverdorf, who was born in 1904. They also discovered that the farming practices used on their homeland were extremely destructive to the land, as combined drought and wind erosion proved devastating not only during their time on the prairies, but also later during the Great Depression. The building of the railroads on the prairies was not yet in full swing. Rudolph and Maria, along with their children, would twice a year make the trip by horse-drawn cart to Alameda for supplies, once after spring seeding and again in late fall. It took 2 days with an overnight stay with a relative at the halfway point. Buy everything from work clothes to fruit and canned goods. Field work was done by horse and with help from their children who were old enough to do so. Babies were carried on Maria's back and front or hung in a small hammock on a fence post to be checked at each round of the field they made. In 1910, they moved to a farm in the Woodsworth district, and then to the farm south of Frobisher in 1913. During this time, the Immigration Act increased the list of prohibited immigrants and gave the government the authority to deport any immigrants they thought were unsuited to the climate or requirements of Canada. By 1914, the government made the act even more restrictive. Immigrants from enemy countries were denied entry. On that same year, the First World War broke out in Europe and lasted until 1918. Great-grandpa Ephraim married Alma Jessie on December 10th, 1930. They had 4 sons, Walter, who was my grandpa, Melvin, Paul, and Carl, and 3 daughters. Ephraim served the community as a member of the Frobisher Rural Telephone Company for many years, helping with the organization and building of the Frobisher Cooperative Association. Walter, my grandfather, was born in April of 1933 in the middle of the Great Depression and attended the South Frobisher School. On graduating, he worked for various farmers around the area. In 1939, the Second World War broke out. In the spring of 1955, Walter accepted a call from the Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod, as a foreign mission builder and bricklayer to Papua New Guinea. He also worked as a minister and supervised local market gardens. He met and married Audrey LaFrenz, who was a missionary nurse or midwife, in December of 1956. They were blessed with 4 children. My mother, Wilma, was born in 1959 at Lutheran Hospital, Mambisanda, Papua New Guinea. She received her education in Papua New Guinea and Australia, returning to Frobisher in May of 1979. She worked at Oxbow, where she met and married Terry Green. After moving to Estevan, she had 3 children, of which I am the youngest, born March 18, 1998. Since my birth, Canada has gone under much change, with recessions in the 80s to 90s, leading to massive government deficits and high unemployment, healthcare being paid for by the government, and various social programs. I'm proud of our country, despite some immigration policies of the past. I would say that I consider myself privileged to be a Canadian living in Estevan, Saskatchewan.